Oh, what?
Okay, so here we are, Sarah Louise and Linda Hines, and we have been working together since March of 2020. And Sarah Louise is like a miracle story. She's worked through the boot camp without ever being in the 21-day boot camp because she was in the year and a half version. So Sarah Louise, do you just want to share like where we met, how this all started first?
Yes, we met in a FND group, and then I think I posted something in the FND group. You commented, and we got on chatting since then, basically. I know that I was in a delusional state. I just can't believe the transformation in myself due to what God has done in my life, and He has used you to give me tools and information, and I've become that much closer to God, and I'm a new person.
You are. So when we met, she was suicidal, and God kept her alive that night and many more. Right? There have just been times that have just been insane. She would get mad and block me, and then I would block her because
Yeah.
I was not regulated. You were not regulated. And could I communicate like this when we started?
No.
What was that like?
I'm not the world's best communicator. I'm in God is teaching me different ways on how to communicate with people, and I'm still in that process. But talking to you, Linda, at the beginning, it was very, very, very challenging and difficult.
Why was that?
Because you were still in the boot camp, you were still doing the FND part. You were really, really struggling with things. And unfortunately, your communication was better than what was, but it still needed God's work on it.
Exactly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the things I've worked with Sarah Louise that are really critical is the trauma brain. And so I'm going to just define the trauma brain is any trauma, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, stroke, fibromyalgia, any symptoms. Okay, no, trauma brain is the neural circuitry that is acquired during traumatic events. For the FND people, or for most of the people that I've worked with over the last few years, it seems to be in childhood. A lot of the trauma is in childhood. And so you design this neural circuitry that served you during the traumatic events, and you acquired or built behavioral coping skills. And so like putting up an arm, for somebody to hit you translates 30 years later into putting up an arm in a different sense. And so the trauma brain is the neural circuitry. The trauma vortex is the active current trauma. So when I went into the trauma vortex, I had current active trauma, but I did not know that I had a trauma brain from from growing up. When we moved into Kellogg, Idaho, we moved from San Diego. It was a really clean, beautiful, colorful place to Kellogg, Idaho, where it was a mining culture and mean, and there was a lot of alcohol. And so I began acquiring coping skills to deal with angry, mean children, and people who drank a lot, and the do as I say, not as I do culture. And so I trained her first on those two things because I had to help her identify where she was falling into things. And it took a really long time. It took the year and a half, basically, right? But tell us
Yes.
where you are right now in your trauma brain, your trauma vortex.
Out of them. Yay.
And how did that, because last week when we got in touch again, you were in the hospital, not
Yes.
doing well, not regulated. Were you self-harming?
Pardon?
Were you self-harming? Okay, that's okay. So now tell, you've just had miracle over miracle, because when you got out, you had not been in social contexts. You hadn't been out socially at all. And so
No.
tell us about, you got out of the hospital and your life changed. Tell us all the miracles.
It's hard to think of all of them because there's been that many, but there's one that stands out that I could not do this 3 weeks ago, but a week past Saturday I did, and that was to actually plan a day out with a friend that I've never seen before, and I actually met her and her daughter. I had to plan from like leaving here in a taxi, getting to the train station, getting on the train, traveling about 1 hour on the train, getting off and then waiting for my friend and her daughter in a massive train station. But and that was a miracle in itself. And then meeting my friend and her daughter was just a complete and utter miracle, because the three of us got on like a house on fire. I had a really, really good, enjoyable day, and I bought some goodies as well, so that helped. But it was a really, really good day. Then I had to plan on getting back, and I did so with God's help, and it was a miraculous day, and it's all through God.
Right. So Sarah, Louise, and I have both, because I just came out of the trauma vortex January 2nd, although I'm still dealing with, I have got coherence and clarity and stability, but because of my memory issues, it makes life difficult to be able to manage putting all the parts together. And I feel so urgently that I need to get this information out to people, because my diagnosis or prognosis was guarded at best, and I couldn't speak. I could barely communicate. Well, communication is the speaking. That was where I could converse, but I could not take input, process, and communicate. That was impossible for me, and that would cause a lot of frustration and anger. And so moving into the healthy vortex. So why don't you share some of the hard times that you've gone through? Like, what are the tools that you've used most?
The tools I've used the most is deep breathing, going to my happy place, and I've got to say worship music as well.
Exactly.
But these are, well, that one, especially that one helps, because when I talk, I can just like fidget with it in my hand, and it's a miracle because it grounds me. So the more grounded I am, the more I make sense of things.
Right. So that you go into the stability, your foundation.
Yeah.
So talk about, can you explain what triangulation is? What are the
I think
practices we do whenever we would get together and you were highly overwhelmed? Where would we start?
Was it the brain? Or
Where
no.
do you feel that?
Yes. Mhm. Yeah. You used to ask, where did I feel that in my body? Like what sensations I felt. And I used to tell you, then was it the brain?
Yep.
Yes. Then you said, where did I feel it in my brain? And I told you, and I think I had to get a point.
A neutral spot.
Yes, that's it, a neutral spot. And I think I had to, it's realignment.
Yes.
I've just worked that out. It's realigning the
Everything, your nervous system, your brain, your behavioral responses, your mental health, because then we would add in emotions. But first we would do the trauma response. Where is it in your body? Because from the body is where the symptoms are originating. So when we can't walk, we can't talk, we can't breathe, when you're having the non-epileptic seizures continually. So now I want you to share, because this is the most beautiful part today. You had trauma news and you went through a process, and I want you to share that, because I think this is really important for my church family to know that we lived in that dark prison. And so sure.
Yeah, the trauma news that I had was that I had to go back. I've got to go back to my apartment. Unfortunately, that's not the news I wanted to get. I was told that I would get help, but for whatever reason, I haven't. But I was very, very downhearted. I was disheartened. I was sad, depressed. I wanted to self-harm. I was extremely suicidal.
So you dropped back into the trauma brain and the trauma
Yes.
vortex. You started pulling controlled behaviors.
Yes. And then I sat down at a desk, and I thought, right, I've got to distract my brain. So I thought, okay, I'll do a word search. So I did a word search, and then I went on to Facebook, and then I noticed that you had posted the service this morning from your church, and I thought, I could watch that now. And then I thought, no, I'll watch it tomorrow. And then I thought, no, why put it off? There's no need to put it off. Watch it now. So I watched it now, and it's just exactly what I wanted or needed to hear. It made my face and love God even stronger now than what it was before I watched it. I asked after the service, I asked myself, would I stand up and say, I believe in Jesus Christ, I believe in God, and sacrifice myself? And I've got to say, hand on heart, yes, I would. And then I started to think, it's God's will for me to go back home. It doesn't matter what I think. And if it's God's will, therefore I've got to obey God. So I am obeying God, and I'm going to make that apartment as my own and my 2 cats, and God will be in that apartment as well. I will make sure that God is part of that apartment. But it's really, really miraculous, because the powerful worship songs before the sermon really spoke to us. It got into my heart. I got filled with the Holy Spirit. It was it was really, really miraculous. And then the sermon spoke to us as well. And I thought, I've got to do this for God, and God give me strength to not do anything silly. And I didn't self-harm, and he's seen me through numerous storms, including this one. And I've worked out that everybody in the world goes through storms. We go through storms to become closer to God. And it's just wonderful. I absolutely love and adore God with all my heart and soul. If it wasn't for him, I would be nothing.
So I want to share just a little bit, because this is so beautiful. First, I'd like you to share, you were in the hospital last week. What were your symptoms that put you in the hospital?
It was a really bad asthma attack and angina attack I had. So it was chest pain, going down my left arm, and feeling sick and yucky.
Okay, so tell us what your symptoms were a month ago. Your FND symptoms.
Oh, sorry. Blimey, a month ago.
Could you walk? Could you get up and move around?
Not much at all. No. I could potter in a hotel room. I could a gentleman used to take me shopping, and I used to go round Walmart, but halfway around I used to have to get the car keys off him and walk to the car and sit in the car until they finished my shopping. But now I can walk all over. The day that I met my friend, I walked every 5 hours. Yes, we had like sit downs for a drink and something to eat, but I was on my feet about 5 hours that day.
When was
And
the
that
last
is
time you did something like that?
when I was knee high to a grasshopper.
Right. You are a miracle, just a miracle. So when we, you've had a lot of diagnoses. Do you want to share some of them?
Yes, mental health
Yeah.
wise, yeah. Severe
First,
depression.
wait a minute. I want you to tell everybody what you used to call me. Can you remember?
Um,
Some crazy thing.
yeah, I think it was the wacky Bible basher, Jesus freak, multicolored hair, 60-year-old American lady,
Mom.
yeah, American mom, yes.
So I adopted Sarah Louise. And then at one point, okay, so the Bible annoyed her, right? Like my Christianity annoyed you because when I would say memorize scripture, we've got to take every thought captive, she would just like, and so then she has had so many diagnoses. So are you still going to go for that Asperger diagnosis?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I am. Yes.
Share why.
At the minute, I must admit I am in two minds because of this sermon I listened to. Because the gentleman said about getting diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it's the way I am, but the way I am, God loves me the way I am. So therefore I should love me the way I am. It doesn't matter about diagnosis, and goodness knows what else that's on a piece of paper.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that because one of the biggest obstacles I had to overcome was when we did the last psych testing. The results from the neuropsych weren't good. And my therapist, my mental health therapist, we had a laugh or because it's just not true. And somebody can't know you after 1 hour. And I wrote a letter because I was trying to communicate because I still couldn't communicate. And he just was so annoyed. What are you trying to tell me here? And I was trying to tell people that I lived in a different flipping dimension. Sarah Louise, did you live in a different dimension when you were in your trauma vortex?
Yes.
Was your perceptual memory intact in any way, shape, or form?
No.
Right? And that's what I want people to understand is our perceptual memory drops offline. And I think when I started studying the holographic universe just last week, I mean, all the pieces were already together because if our memories are stored like a holograph and you go like this and the holograph disappears, so any fragmentation, which is what I experienced, and my story will come out later, but just miracle after miracle after miracle. And I just want to applaud you The work you have done is so magnificent. And Sarah Louise, you are going to be a nurse. And we have worked through so many things. And right now she's going to get ready to go back to her apartment, her flat in another place where she lived in the trauma vortex, in the trauma brain. Do you believe that you're going to have any problem with coherence, clarity, or stability going back there?
No, no.
How can you be so sure?
Because okay, like this evening is a good example. If I ever go back in the trauma vortex or the trauma brain or whatever, I know what to do now. I have got the tools in place. They are stored in my brain, and I can do it with God's help. And so, like this evening, it was just a couple of hours I was in trauma vortex and trauma brain. If this happened 2, 3 a month ago, it would have lasted at least nearly a week, I would say. But no, it just lasted a couple of hours, and I know that I can do this when I get back to my apartment. With God's help, I can do anything
Yes.
with God's help, because he gives me strength to do it.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. Is there anything else that you can think of?
I know that you were going to mention my gender.
Oh, yeah, because Sarah Louise decided she was going to be Caden James at one point, and that annoyed me. But God said, love her, love him. And so I even called him him. I did everything that God said, because God wants us to be able to step out of our comfort zone and love people right where they're at. And I told you from the very beginning, I would not leave you. I would support you. And even though we've separated, the first few times you were probably very uncomfortable, wondering, is she really going to come back?
Yes.
Go ahead and share a little bit about that.
A little bit about
the fear, and about the anger. Just, you would get very angry with me because of my Christianity. And
yes. Yes. Yeah. I've just got to say, it's hard to say because I don't want to offend you. But it was like, I've just got to say it how it is. It was like controlling, in a way. I know that you had my best interests at heart, and that, but it was it, and I know that you didn't mean to be controlling. It just felt a bit controlling.
And that's the key right there, is it felt controlling. So your perceptual memory's out of whack, right? So I wasn't really controlling you. I was telling you the steps you had to take, and you didn't want to hear them. You didn't want to have to take them. It was too hard. And that's the thing that I've learned through here, is each time we would separate, I would grow. And I would be able to listen to more of your story and understand where at first I didn't want to hear. And when I work with people in the trauma vortex, in their trauma brain, I don't want to hear the trauma story. I don't need to hear it. You don't need to state it again. And so that was really hard, because everybody wants to download. And And the more we download, the more we ignite all of the poor neural circuitry, and it just, everything spirals downhill. So
I've just had an epiphany.
you have, go share.
I've God's just given us like some words, and what it was, because you were, I found that you weren't listening, basically, that you were like taking control of the conversation, and then I would feel invalid. I would feel invalidated, and that's a big issue for me, or it was. But it was a big issue for me, and then I would retaliate. And when I retaliate, it's just because I'm scared. I'm scared because I'm insecure.
Right.
It's like when a frightened little dog shows its teeth and is snappy and barks a lot. It like shows its attitude. Well, with me, I get angry and my attitude comes out, or used to come out. But it's all because I'm scared, and then I become insecure because I think I'm losing that person. And then
So,
if I lose that person, I've lost part of me.
right. One last thing, because this is really important, because you've really regulated over the last week. And when you spoke to one of your friends whose name begins with a C, because we're recording, I don't want to use her name, right? When you called me, you were so angry because she could not understand your point of view. And so we talked, we did a session, and then I left you with the thoughts of, can you share that part of the conversation? There were two things. One was how you viewed it, and then the parts you could thank her for, and how that all went.
Yes. Basically, she had one opinion and I had a different opinion, and I wasn't at the stage of accepting her opinion, or actually doing doing her, because she, unfortunately, my friend at the time thought it was a coping strategy. That no, I thought it was a coping strategy, but she just thought it was just rude. And
What was it?
It was when I started to get angry or frustrated, I would end the call. And yes, it was a coping strategy, because the other person would have got a mouthful from me, which they wouldn't have deserved, and I would have got worked up, and I didn't deserve that. So it's, in a way, it's avoidance. So just cut the call. Unfortunately, she didn't accept my way of thinking or my perspective of it. She just thought I was being rude, and she just would not listen to my side. I would listen to her side. I would validate her and say, yes, I can understand that it must be rude, but please understand that I don't do it just to be ignorant or rude. I do it for this reason, but unfortunately she didn't validate this. She didn't think of my side of it. And then I came to you, and we basically we just had two different, we had to act like adults. We had two different opinions. It was like we had to agree to disagree.
So you
Uh,
were pulling out of trauma circuitry, trying
yes,
to make sense, and it didn't make sense. And so you needed clarity and coherence from me to be able to perceptually understand what had just happened and to be able
yeah,
to accept it from a new perspective.
yes, definitely. Because I just thought she was being nasty to us. I thought, oh, you're in the right mood, you're taking it out on me. But talking to you, you helped me understand that we just had differences in opinion.
Right. And one of the most important things I want the church to hear on this point right here is that she was acting out of correct social cues. When somebody hangs up on you, that's rude. So
Yeah,
this is normal. This is correct perceptual social interactions. And when you're in the trauma vortex in the trauma brain, you don't have correct social interactions. You do not have a possibility of considering things from a different perspective. You have got to learn to be able to navigate that. And that's one of the things that I want to tell people, I want to get out to the whole world, is that we can navigate it. It's easy. It's not hard. It takes practice, and it depends on the severity of your functional limitations. Somebody who's having the NES, the non-epileptic seizures continually, I just had to learn to breathe and to breathe through the seizures. Now I can remember the seizures and I can remember the pain, and my family would try to move my limbs and my limbs weren't moving. And just different things. I remember the first time somebody used peppermint oil, an essential oil. It was like magic. The seizure was over so quickly, and special music and hot packs, ice packs at the right places. But first, my whole goal is I just want people to feel hopeful for the first time, because I get on the FND groups and I get on the mental health groups, and I go out of my apartment and listen to people, and everybody's dysregulated. And everybody, when isolation started for everybody else, I moved out of isolation for the first time. I was ready to move to Coeur d'Alene. Now I stayed in isolation, but that was my disability, the inability to go out in the light with the motion and communication issues. So, and I was still on a walker. Anyway, I'm so grateful.
I can remember, I think it was last summer that you were sitting outside and you had to ring me because you were stuck in the chair. And I know that we worked through like movement and deep breathing and triangulation.
Right.
But I can remember that vividly. That
I can remember now too that you say that, and I can remember calling you because that was a coping skill. You were going to be because I didn't have anybody here yet. I wasn't swimming with Melissa yet. And so, wow, we have come so far, baby.
we have.
We're going to celebrate anyway. Okay, we're going to end this Zoom meeting, and there's going to be more because we're going to walk through so many details of just learning to regulate, and we're going to do it together because we're a team. So I love you. Bless you.
Bless you too.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.